Choosing Love by ginnyrules27. Chapter 15. Leah scowled as she surveyed the area around her. It had been a couple of months since she was unceremoniously exiled from Auradon, and there had been no effort to get her off the hellscape that was the Isle. To make matters worse, there was no one here who recognized her as the queen she was. Instead, the Isle dwellers were content in shunning her and making her get by with minimal effort. No, but they were fine in showing deferential treatment towards Mal. One of the brats she'd seen by the docks the day she had arrived had even called her captain when talking about her, as if the little spawn knew how to captain anything. According to Natalie, Mal was floundering at even the basic tasks that a royal would know. Of course, that would be an adult royal, she thought with a smirk. After all, we don't come out of the womb knowing what we do. But I would have thought months of watching Mal fail and embarrass him would have been enough to make Ben realize that he was better off with my Audrey. Ah, Audrey. She was the only member of the family who hadn't forgotten her. Leah lived for the weekly letters, filling her in on all the activities of Auradon. But her beloved granddaughter seemed to be the only one who cared about her. Her grandson, Philip, had yet to reach out to her, though why she would want to communicate with that spare is beyond her. Honestly, how egocentric do you have to be to name a child after yourself? Leah thought with a small scoff. At least my Aurora had some sense when she named Audrey. It wasn't some common name like Philip. I am not at all surprised that Philip hasn't yet come to my aid. He's always hated me, his own mother-in-law. I would have thought that he wouldn't be as petty as to poison Aurora against me. She sighed as she shook her head, looking at her makeshift home. It wasn't the castle she had spent so many years in, but there weren't really many castles on the Isle. Oh, sure, she could have tried to set up shop in Maleficent's empty castle, but that wasn't something she was about to do. For one, it would have involved spending time in a location that Maleficent had once called home. Who knew how many booby traps that demon had set up? However, that wasn't the only reason. There were groups of the Isle brats who seemed to work in shifts, guarding the castle for Mal. Mal! Gods, the very thought sent waves of anger down Leah's spine. Maleficent's spawn had gotten better treatment on the Isle than she did, and she was a ranking royal of Auradon. Those brats should have been grateful she even lowered herself to talk to them. Thankfully, Lady Persephone was still on the Isle as well. At least there was someone who was worth the effort of having a conversation with. At least, that's what Leah had thought. Lady Persephone! Leah smiled upon seeing the goddess as she took one of her many walks around the Isle. Finally, someone with Auradon's social graces. The last time she had lowered herself to talking to one of the brats, the little blonde-haired goblin had pulled out a dagger and warned Leah that unless she wanted to know what a pincushion felt like, she'd leave her the hell alone. Honestly, the language on that girl. She couldn't have been more than 14 years old, and yet she swore like a sailor. Then again, what did Leah expect? This was the Isle, the same place that had produced Mal, a girl who was more than content with lying straight to Auradon's face. Leah? Persephone said, her tone flat. With Maleficent in her current state of being a lizard, it was much safer for her to walk around the whole Isle and see if there were any kids who needed assistance. She had not expected to see the former Queen of Aurora, even if she knew of Leah's banishment to the Isle thanks to her son. Persephone held back a sigh as she thought about her son. Her Haddie. Talking on the mental link wasn't the same as holding him in her arms, and unfortunately, the portal only worked to talk through when she activated it from the Auradon side. Otherwise, she had been able to talk to both of her kids and find out why Mal had her mental link on mute for so long. It wasn't as if Persephone was constantly chatting to her through it. and the other gods seldom used it unless it was an emergency. Still, she liked talking to Mal, and knowing something was wrong but not being able to do anything was torture. Hades knew it too. He could feel the waves of panic and stress that had been coming from Mal's link, but he was put on mute as well. It was honestly worse than the time Mal had run away to her clubhouse after Haddie was born. She hadn't been trained how to use the mental link, so they couldn't use it to find her. This time, they knew where she was, but she was refusing to speak to them. "Finally, someone I can petition here. There's been a mistake." "A mistake?" Persephone asked, raising an eyebrow as she brought herself back into the conversation she was being forced to have. After the events of Family Day, Persephone made it a point not to be alone with Leah, should the aged monarch do something that might force Persephone's hand and cause Leah to remember how the mint plant came into being. "How so? I don't believe King Ben would have sent you to the Isle had there not been a reason. After all, he knows what the Isle is like thanks to Mal and her friends." Leah resisted the urge to roll her eyes at the mention of Mal. She was trying to get on the goddess's good side, and showing contempt towards the girl she thought of as her daughter was probably not the best way to do so. Why Lady Persephone thought that was still a mystery to Leah. Oh, sure, the girl technically was Lady Persephone's stepdaughter, being the biological daughter of Lord Hades, but there was no denying the fact that Mal was Maleficent's daughter. The sooner Persephone realized that, the sooner they could prevent the destruction of Auradon. King Ben may believe that he had a reason, but really he just let his council demean me and persecute me without reason, all because of some baseless accusations that I tried to starve the people of the Isle. Yeah, I probably wouldn't shout those accusations while out in public on the Isle, Persephone said dryly. There's a large contingent still loyal to Mal and my husband. Not to mention, Leah, my son spent 11 years of his life dealing with that food you deemed acceptable for the children of the Isle to eat. If it hadn't been for the fact that I had the ability to bring over some food from Auradon, I've no doubt that all the kids would be a lot worse off than they are. This time Leah did not resist the urge to roll her eyes. Honestly, Lady Persephone, you can't honestly believe. Leah, if you truly feel that there was no harm done, then you'll have no qualms in eating the food that will be presented on the barge. Persephone said, Why, no, of course not. I'd gladly eat anything that was presented to me. Oh, no, Leah. That's not how it works here, Persephone said, and unless Leah was mistaken, there was a small smirk on Persephone's lips. If you're not present at the barge when it delivers the monthly food drop, then you're likely to not get anything unless you're fortunate enough to make an alliance. The only ones who are fortunate as to not be there are the evil queen, Jafar, Cruella, and my husband. The latter three is because they have their own businesses to run, or because it's easier to limit contact with her in Cruella's case, and the evil queen because everything that happened with her husband. They may have been on an island full of villains, but even they had a code. Daniel had been beloved by many of the children of the Isle because of his kind nature, while the adults appreciated his strong work ethic and his tendency to not complain. After all, he had volunteered to come to the Isle to be with the evil queen. Villains understood loyalty, after all. Even after Daniel was taken off of the Isle by King Ben, there was still some speculation that he would return. Obviously, once that happened, the deliveries of food from Hades' restaurant would stop, but until that day arrived, they would continue. Oh, and Leah, Persephone said as she turned to leave, don't think you'll be able to just get food from my husband's restaurant, or Ursula's, if you are unable to get anything from the delivery badge. After all, I did inform my husband of your abhorrent behaviour at Family Day, and, well, I'm sure Uma's already informed her mother about what you've done towards the Isle. You might get lucky, though, and be able to purchase something from Frollo's shop. You and he are a lot alike, if you think about it. Both of you were content to commit mass murder to get your goals. Leah's jaw dropped, and Persephone turned on her heel, making her way back whence she came. It had certainly been an alarming notion. The idea of getting food for herself? She was a royal, after all. She had people to do that for her. But as the month came and went with the delivery barge arriving, Leah watched as the denizens of the Isle trampled each other for the remnants of what had been delivered after Lord Hades's representatives had grabbed what they could. They were nothing to look at. Two brats, if Leah was being generous. One, a tall, skinny boy who seemed to be perpetually nervous and twitching. The other, a small, dark-skinned girl with dull red hair. Once they collected their prize, the kids scurried off in the direction of the underworld. That seemed to be the unspoken signal for the others to commence the free-for-all. Honestly, it was like scenes Leah would watch on the news about people killing each other for a sale at one of the many shops Audrey would frequent. Didn't they know there'd be enough food for everyone? Then again, these were villains. Maybe they just preferred killing people. When it was finally Leah's turn, she was shocked to see how picked over everything was. She was lucky to find a few cans of soup that looked to be about a week past their expiration date, a couple of carrots that were blacker than Mal's soul, and a brisket with more fuzz on it than her grandson's chin. She grabbed it, of course, because food was food. She needed her strength if she was going to get off this hellscape of a rock. Eating it would also prove that Mal had kicked up too much of a fuss at the council meeting, and show Ben that he'd be better off with Audrey. Honestly, a girl who was that fussy about food would only complain and drive a wedge in their relationship. Audrey was content to let things rest where they may. To her surprise, all eating the disgusting food did was give her food poisoning. Much to no one's sympathy for that matter. Well, except for Audrey. Her weekly letters contained messages urging Leah to feel better and save her strength. That one day she would be reunited with her, and that Leah would regain her rightful spot as Queen of Aurora. There was a reason why she had begun to hypnotize Chad, after all. Her granddaughter needed a reward for her unbridled loyalty, and a boyfriend who would never leave her was just the thing to get the girl who had everything. Granted, it was a non-magical hypnosis, which were reported to be weaker than magical hypnosi, but Leah had no magic to speak of. If she reached out to the good fairies for their assistance, there was a risk of getting word to Audrey and spoiling the surprise. Those three nitwits couldn't keep a secret if their lives depended on it. I have to wonder how long the hypnosis will stay without my administering it every week, Leah thought, though Natalie should be able to handle that. She's certainly handling Mal just the way I thought she would. Honestly, one would think a supposed daughter of Persephone would be able to handle a bit of stress. But from the reports I get, Mal's slowly growing more and more frazzled by the day. Well, you know what they say about karma. Had Mal not enchanted Ben somehow and stolen him from Audrey, she wouldn't be going through this. Though I never thought about implying she'd embarrass Ben by acting like herself. I mean, it's obvious, but I would have just slipped in some comments in the Gazelle. Natalie shows some true promise to say such comments to Mal's face. As much as I love Aurora, there are times I wonder if she is truly my daughter, considering how she favours the Isle brats and comes to their defence. Leah shook her head, trying to rid herself of her thoughts. The brats of the Isle had proven that they'd be lost in thought only meant they'd have an opportunity to steal what was rightfully hers. After all, that's what Mal did, and that's what her own daughter did as well. Stole her ability to rule the kingdom. She had a plan, though. It was near the day that the food barge would arrive, and Leah was going to be on it. Once she was back in Auradon, she'd clean house first and reinstate herself as the rightful Queen of Aurora. She'd make Audrey her heir, of course. Her granddaughter's loyalty would need to be rewarded. Not to mention the hypnosis Leah had put on Chad would have to be re-established to allow Audrey the chance to run 2 kingdoms. It helped, of course, that Chad was already besotted with Audrey. If it weren't for the fact that her granddaughter deserved the best, Leah would have been satisfied with the charming heir as a match. But Audrey was meant to be more than just a queen. She was born to be the queen, and now because of that sneaking snake of a girl. She had lost that chance. It just wasn't fair. The evil queen's brat had been the one to break the barrier and cause Maleficent, of all villains, to have the chance to escape. Yet it was her who was unceremoniously sent to the Isle? And for what? Trying to protect Auradon? The villains had their food, and really, they should have been grateful that they got what they got, she thought as she made her way down to the docks. Night had fallen, or at least she assumed it had. With the constant cloud cover, it was almost nigh impossible to tell if it was 10 in the morning or 6 in the evening. But Leah could assume it was night, judging by the almost empty street she was on. Before I continue, guys, this gets graphic and it ends with Leah not being alive, so if you want to skip to the next chapter, go ahead, or wait for it if this is soon after the post. Anyway, here we go. Well, well, well. A menacing voice came out from the shadows, causing Leah to jump as she stopped in her tracks, and looking around to see where the voice was coming from. What do we have here, Bonsai? I don't know, Shenzi. What do you think, Ed? Another voice responded, only to get a laugh from this Ed person. Leah knew she'd have to think quickly to try to get some form of an alliance, or at least to get assistance to get out of the docks. Of course, all thought went out of the window as the owner of the voice stepped out from the shadows, and Leah realized she was surrounded by about 12 hyenas. 12 angry hyenas by the looks on their faces, though the 4 smaller ones simply looked amused. "Humans informed us about you," the owner of the first voice, as she stepped forward, said. Shenzi, Leah believed. She also noted there was a slight, menacing growl to the hyena's voice, though Leah was sure she was imagining it. The hyena's feud was with Simba, not with her. I mean you no harm. Ha! One of the smaller hyenas let out a bark of laughter. Captain Mal and Captain Uma warned the other humans you'd try that. Jasiri! Shenzi barked in warning, and Jasiri nodded, backing up into the pack of hyenas. Turning back to Leah, Shenzi stated, "My daughter is correct, though. The other humans did state you'd try to lie and say you mean us no harm." "But that's true! Your feud is with the lions, not with me." "Our feud, as you would call it, is with whoever threatens the cackle," Shenzi growled. "Do you not think by denying the humans food, you'd threaten the safety of my family? Of my children?" They had been lucky that they had survived for so long. It had actually been due to the captains approaching her all those years ago to set up an alliance. Normally, Shenzi would have been wary about doing such a thing. The last alliance she had put her family in, Scar had stabbed them in the back. Granted, they got their revenge on him, and the humans knew all about it. But 2 things had prevented Shenzi from eating the 2 captains where they stood. After all, they had willingly come into her den to talk about an alliance. That showed bravery, a trait that was rare for the humans of the Isle. As well, they were but cubs when they approached her, only 5 years of age, and yet desperate to make deals to secure their safety. Normally, Shenzi wouldn't have cared about the age of the human cubs, but, unbeknownst to her, she had been carrying her own cubs at the time. So she had been a little more agreeable. And it didn't hurt that the humans really made the deal more beneficial to the hyenas than they did for themselves. Her cackle would get to patrol the Isle, eating any dead or decaying humans they could find. As well, they would have full access to the dead bodies that came out of the monthly food deliveries. All the humans asked for was that they had the chance to remove the bodies of any children under the age of 12, or any of their people, should they be in the crowd. As well, Captain Mal somehow had access to fresh water, not that salty stuff that helped imprison them on this island. It wasn't fit for the humans to drink, let alone the hyenas. Though if they were desperate enough, They could get some hydration from the blood of their kills. The deal favoured the hyenas in such a way that Shenzi would have been a fool to turn it down. But she was still wary. Like she said, the last time they entered a deal that favoured the hyenas to such a degree, it turned out to be a bust for them. So it was an alliance that was under probationary period, until Shenzi felt as if she could at least count on the humans, if not trust them. The time came sooner than she thought, when that moronic evil queen captured her children and used them as party favours for the other brats attending her spawn celebration. As soon as Shenzi learned about that, she had rushed to the pirates. To her surprise, Mal had jumped on the chance to get her cubs back, and made sure each cub got water and food upon their return. It was then that Shenzi knew that this was an alliance that would not end horribly. If it did, she could always do what they had done to Scar. Even though both captains were gone, the new captain was honouring that agreement. He seemed fairly confident for a male, though most of the time the black-furred captain handled any discussions that were needed. The pirates seemed to have the right idea of it, keeping the females in charge. Even the new captain showed deference to the black-furred captain. "What are we going to do with her, Shenzi?" Bonsai asked, pulling Shenzi back to the present. I know you just ate," Leah lied, sounding braver than she felt. She may have been a queen, but even queens knew the dangers of angry hyenas. "Actually, we didn't," Shenzi said, and smirked as she could see the colour fade from the human's face. "Shere Khan's brat beat us to a child, though it wouldn't matter, even if we did just eat." "Don't you know what they say about a hyena's belly?" Shenzi didn't wait for an answer, but instead dove straight for the human's throat. Once her teeth bit down, it was as if it was a signal to the others to dive in. The human honestly didn't last long, but that was fine by them. Less of a fight meant less blood on their fur. "I'll report back to the pirates. They should know that we've rid them of an enemy," Shenzi stated with a small smirk as she gnawed on one of the human's bones, having quickly stripped it of its flesh. As matriarch of the cackle, she had the right to claim the biggest one there was, though there were plenty of bones to go around for all of them. The human's fur was ripped to shreds, though there was a red-furred human cub who seemed to like messing with the furs of the other humans. As well, the cub seemed to be under the pirate's protection at the very least. If she felt up for it, she might gift the bits to the human. But honestly, after a meal like that, all she wanted to do was curl up in her den and sleep. "Mother, why don't I do that?" Jasiri offered. "Because, even though you are next in line as the matriarch, I am still the leader," Shenzi said firmly. It would be bad form to insult the humans by sending her cub in her place, considering it had never been done before. Oh sure, Jasiri had accompanied her when it came to having discussions with the humans, but had never interacted with them one-on-one before. "Yes, Mother," Jasiri nodded. Shenzi smirked slightly and walked over to her. "That's my wicked girl," she said, and nuzzled her daughter's face. "You all run back to the den. I shouldn't be long." Her cubs nodded and ran off. "Bonsai," Shenzi said, her voice growing hard. "If Shere Khan, his girlfriend or brat, or those infernal lions harm them, you will see the inside of my belly. No harm will come to them," Bonsai promised before leading the rest of the cackle off to make sure nothing happened to the cubs. He had no wish to see if Shenzi would be true to her threat. Shenzi sighed and shook her head before making her way to the pirate's den. She hated the smell of the salt water, but it was a temporary evil. Besides, informing the pirates meant that word would get back to Captain Mal. After what she did to make sure her cubs got back safe and sound, informing the purple-haired human about the death of her enemy was the least Shenzi could do. "Hyena on the gangplank!" one of the humans called, and Shenzi wasn't going to lie. She loved the fact that there was always a hint of fear and trepidation in the humans' voices whenever she walked up. It meant that these humans at least had a brain rattling around in their skulls. "Thanks, Nick! Someone get Harriet!"
The new captain called as he walked up to greet Shenzi. Matriarch, it is a pleasure. Is everything all right?
There is no need to get the female captain, Captain Henry, though I do appreciate the courtesy, Shenzi told the red-furred male. I only came to inform you that my cackle has rid you of an enemy.
Please say it's Freddy, please say it's Freddy, a brown-furred male begged as he passed by. Ryan, Henry warned, but there was a hint of amusement in his tone. Zevon? A black-furred male asked as he walked up. Matriarch, would you like to take this meeting to the captain's quarters and away from prying ears?
Henry offered, shooting a small glare towards the black-furred male, who at least had the common decency to look sheepish. Yes, please. Thank you, Captain. Shenzi nodded and followed Henry to the captain's quarters. It was a room that Shenzi was well familiar with, considering it was where she would often meet with Captains Mal and Uma when the need arose. However, Shenzi couldn't help but notice that the room was not empty as it normally was. CJ told me that you were meeting with the matriarch, the black or brown-furred female told Henry. Shenzi could never really tell with her. Her fur colour seemed to change with the light.
Why am I not surprised, Harriet?
Henry chuckled.
Shenzi was just saying that the cackle has rid us of an enemy. Freddy?
I don't know who this Freddy is, but the enemy we rid you of was an older female. Shenzi told them. I have to say, they should send more enemies over from across the salt water. There's a lot more fat on the bones than there are of the humans here.
Henry and Harriet froze at those words. Leah? The woman responsible for the food we've been getting, according to Mal?
Harriet asked, and seemed to sink back in her chair as Shenzi nodded.
You okay?
Henry asked, his voice soft.
I don't know why,
Harriet said softly.
But it feels like my mother's been avenged somehow. I know she died in childbirth, but I know,
Henry said, his voice still soft.
I think most of our mothers were the same way. Gil locked out, being born in a warm month. Not to mention the fact that his mum gave Gaston a son. That would have been enough motivation to make sure she got more food than the others.
Shenzi kept quiet, knowing that the humans' walls would come back up once she spoke. It was strange, though. She found she was oddly touched by the fact that the humans had reacted the way they did around her. Almost as if they could trust her.
I'll have to call a crew meeting,
Henry stated. You'll need to inform Mal, Harriet told him. At the very least, inform Lady Persephone or Lord Hades, and they can pass the news along.
Right.
Henry nodded before shaking his head slightly.
Thank you for informing us, Matriarch. Would you like some water before you leave?
Shenzi nodded. If any can be spared, it would be appreciated, Captain.
Lord Hades just sent over a batch last night, Henry said. I'll go and fetch some. Be right back.
He left and quickly made his way to the deck where his friends were still mingling about. They were not who Henry wanted to talk to, though.
Dustin,
Henry stated, grabbing one of the boy's arms.
I didn't do it. I don't want to know, Henry sighed. You haven't pissed off Lord Hades or Lady Persephone in some way, have you? Not that I know of. Good. I need you to run to the underworld and let them know that we need to send word to Mal and Uma. Tell them Leah's been taken care of.
Dustin nodded and took off as soon as Henry let go of his arm. Henry chuckled softly as he made his way back to the galley to get the water. Dustin was a grade A prat at times and held the record for the number of flings held among the crew, but he could still be counted on for more responsibilities than, say, the younger crew members. After all, Ryan and CJ were only 14, the same age Brooke was when she left the crew to join Freddy's gang. While it wasn't Brooke's fault that she had left, she might try and use that connection of being relatively close in age to try to lure Ryan or CJ to Freddy's side. More so CJ than Ryan, if Henry thought about it. Freddy had commented about how CJ was growing up during a face-off last year. It had taken 3 crew members to drag Harry off to prevent him from killing the male Frollo. Not that it would have been a waste if Harry had, but Mal was firm on the whole "we don't kill" thing. They were the only gang on the Isle with that rule. Every angel, with the exception of Brooke and Claudine, had killed at least 1 rat during a face-off.
Brooke because she could only just left the rats, and Claudine because she only ever aimed for the shoulder if she had to. They also had to be sure to keep on their guard if they ever found themselves in caster territory. Gisela or Zevon wouldn't think twice before throwing a potion at them. And with Mal, Uma, Jay and Harry off the Isle, they couldn't afford to lose any more crew members than they already had.
Henry?
Ryan asked, pulling Henry out of his thoughts, as he realised they were still standing in the galley.
Sorry,
Henry said softly.
You okay?
Fine. Ryan rolled his eyes.
You're not keeping information from me because I'm under 15, are you? Believe it or not, I won't be traumatized if there's information that's not sunshine and rainbows.
Whatever those are. Henry snorted in amusement. Another thing Mal and Uma had insisted on was working on keeping the innocence of the younger crew members for as long as they could. Maybe it came from having younger siblings, but whatever it was, they were the captains, so their rule was law. No talking about flings around the under 15-year-olds. No under 15s allowed in face-offs, though Ryan often broke this rule. CJ tried to break it too, but it was harder when she had two siblings watching her every move.
Keep a secret?
Henry asked.
Did you finally get a girlfriend?
Ryan asked, sounding a little excited at the prospect. Henry rolled his eyes.
Leah won't be a problem for us anymore.
Ryan's eyes got wide, and he grew quiet before rushing out of the galley. Henry knew exactly where Ryan was going to tell CJ. Those two were closer than Harry and Uma if such a thing was possible. Henry wouldn't be surprised if they partnered off together at some point in the future. But, for right now, they were no more than friends, which Harry was fine with. No need for them to be growing up before they had to. Quickly grabbing the water, Henry made his way back to the captain's quarters.
Apologies for the wait, matriarch,
he said as he presented Shenzi with the water. Shenzi nodded and began to drink. As she did so, Henry sat down next to Harriet.
I told Dustin to inform Lord Hades and Lady Persephone,
he muttered to her.
Hopefully he doesn't dally or try to pick up someone up for a quick fling before coming back here.
Not with it being dark as night out there. Harriet shook her head. Dustin's a prat and an idiot at times, but he's no fool. Lord Hades might actually tell him to stay the night. No point in risking Dustin coming across Shere Khan or Zira. If I come across your Cackle member, I'll accompany him back here, Shenzi said as she looked up. It's not safe for humans in this time of night.
That would be appreciated, matriarch.
Henry nodded, and Shenzi nodded back. Before long the water was emptied, and Shenzi knew it was time for her to make her way back to her den. Giving her farewells to the humans, she got up and made her way across the deck and down the gangplank. Thankfully there were no other creatures of the night out and about. Either that or Shenzi just didn't encounter them. But no matter what, she made her way to her den without issue. I have to say, she thought as she curled up by her cubs, a hyena's belly may never be full, but right now, it's the closest it's ever felt to being so. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh boy, now that is a dark chapter. I think that's one of the darkest I've done on this. Wow, okay, this felt almost Game of Thrones-esque. You know, it's starting with a character who dies in the chapter. Oh boy. But quite a few things in this. So, as suspected, Leah was the one to encourage Natalie to put that much pressure on Mal. And if you missed it, the pressure that they're putting on her, the knowledge, that's stuff that an adult royal should know, not one who's 16. And the thing about the embarrassment thing, oh my god, I knew they were doing this intentionally, but holy crap. This woman deserves whatever punishment Hades has waiting for her. And while I don't think anyone deserves to be eaten alive by hyenas, I'm not going to cry over this woman's death, even if she is merely fictional. And one thing again, hypnotizing shit! Okay, I'm not as scared of hypnotism as I used to be, but when I was a kid, hypnotism genuinely terrified me. The idea of not being able to control what you're thinking or feeling, to lose control of your own mind by someone else's control, someone else puppeting you. I think it started with Kaa from the Jungle Book hypnotizing Mowgli, because ever since then I've been terrified of snakes, and Ursula when she was Vanessa, using Ariel's voice to hypnotize Eric. Both of those scenes in Disney movies left me having nightmares for quite a while, so ever since then it's terrified me. And just, oh my god. But one thing I do like in this is the look from Shenzi's perspective. It's terrifying, don't get me wrong, but it's fascinating to be seen through the eyes of a non-human. So her saying they're black-furred or red-furred because of their hair colour, and saying the deference thing, because, fun fact, the highest ranking male in a cackle of hyenas is still lower ranked than the lowest ranking female. I don't believe in complete and utter female supremacy, I believe in equality. But part of me is kind of glad that that dynamic exists, at least in fiction, as much as it is in reality. And for those of you who don't know, Jasiri is actually a good guy from the TV show The Lion Guard, but it looks like ginnyrules27 rewrote that bit for her to be Shenzi's daughter and the future matriarch of the cackle, which I love. I love the names of different animal groups, by the way. A cackle of hyenas, a murder of crows, a cauldron of bats. Love that kind of thing. Anyway, I've blabbered on enough. You guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-dino pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.